What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Pursuing Purpose. And guys, today, as you can tell, I've got probably one of the best dynamic duos to ever exist. Sweet. So, Justin Sigel and Kevin Morrison. Thank you guys for joining me today.
So a round of applause on here.
Right.
Like the
studio audience.
Yeah, studio audience.
Let's go.
Yeah, wonderful.
Danielle, it is a pleasure and an honor to be on this podcast. Aww. I can't tell you how long I've been waiting. Since you started it is how long I've been waiting.
Bro, when Justin asked me to be on this podcast, I was like, are you serious or are you just like joking around?
Yeah, her response was priceless.
Well, because I'm like, Justin is like thinking traveling artist, like who would want, both of them living lives. Kevin's married.
Kevin's
like
a traveling artist.
Who would want to be on my podcast? But like they took the time to come out here and do this. But yeah, I've known them probably 4 or 5 years now since I was like a freshman in high school. Justin was the communications director here, and
R.I.P.
basically RIP. Basically taught me everything that I know, grew my passion for all of this, and now I've kind of taken over. And then Kevin was kids and youth assistant for a while. Like literally, he does everything.
Kevin was the gopher.
Yeah, and then he became our youth pastor. Justin was very involved with youth as well. So both of these guys have literally raised me. Basically, have meant so much to me in my life. I would not be who I am without you guys.
You've grown up so fast, and I need you to not get this emotional. Okay.
I know.
Okay.
I was like, oh my gosh. No, because I truly consider you guys just like mentors, but just like brothers, and I mean all of the above.
I consider you family. I consider you family.
I consider you guys
I
family.
do too. What do you mean you can't speak for me?
I can't speak
Yes,
for
you can. If you know something, you can speak for it.
So I'm so happy to have you guys on
Danielle,
here.
I'm incredibly proud of you.
Oh,
yes.
Thank you
Likewise.
guys so much.
It's
already
an honor
getting
to be
emotional.
on here.
Okay, let's get past it.
Okay, that's the
not what we're
emotional
here
part.
to
Now we're done. But maybe just go on ahead, like introduce us like a little bit about yourselves. Maybe Justin start, and then Kevin. Maybe even just how you guys met and like know each other.
My name is Justin Sigel. What do I do?
He's famous.
You're a full-time performing artist.
I'm a full-time artist, full-time painter, I should say, because if you say artist in Nashville, they think you do music, with a guitar in front of you.
Good old country.
So,
Justin's a country artist.
I am a country artist, an artist in the country. No, I do paintings and stuff. My background is in performance art, so I create these 5-foot paintings in 5 to 7 minutes to music. Really create an experience where people can get involved. They can help feed into the energy to create the painting, and so that's my passion. And yeah, I also do some photography on the side, some video editing,
and he's very good at it.
I have a ton of social media pages for my different passions. But
bro, he's over here like being so humble, acting like it's nothing. Like y'all, like incredibly talented.
At Sigel Arts, just to make a plug, because
he's not link in the bio for sure. You already know.
At Sigel Arts on everything.
Like TikTok, Instagram, for like all of it, Facebook, all of it. So link in the bio for sure.
Yeah. Cheers. All right, Kev Dog.
Cheers, mate. All right.
Is it my turn?
Kev Dog.
Yeah, my name is Kevin. Do I say my last name?
What's
Morrison?
wrong with your eye, Kevin?
Yeah, the podcast budget.
We're jumping right in.
The podcast budget, unfortunately, did not have enough money in it
the makeup crew did not show up today
to touch me up. I can't play softball apparently, and so I took a ball to the face a couple weeks ago. It is healed a whole lot better than what it was before.
It honestly, like your nose looks really good.
My nose looks great.
Yeah, like the under eyes are black.
Was it broken?
It's fractured.
It is fractured.
I'll show you X-rays later.
Up here where the scar is?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's what happened to my face. Pay attention to our wonderful words instead of our looks today. Is what I ask. But yeah. So
you need to come up with a more interesting story.
I got beat up by my wife.
There you go.
Shout out Mackenzie. Let's go.
So Danielle mentioned I used to work at said church that she works at now, and was the youth pastor. Loved it. Have a really strong passion with working with students in youth ministry. I don't do that currently. I do disaster response for the Red Cross. That's probably the lamest thing
basically
I could
the
ever
same.
say.
I mean.
Basically the same. But yeah, that's my life. I love sports. I'm a big soccer fan. So shout out to all the soccer people that are listening to this.
Yeah.
And since he didn't say it, Justin and I, we met initially. We went to school together. Lee University, go Flames.
Flame on.
He was doing some dance things, and I was also a part of this thing that was involved with dance. And
I always forget that's how we met.
That's how we initially met, and then because it's a Christian university, they're not allowed to have real fraternities and sororities, so we had fake fraternities and sororities. And so Justin and I are frat brothers, and our story kind of goes on from just that. Justin is the reason why I came to Murfreesboro initially, but
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Things have evolved since then, and that's a story for another podcast another day if Danielle happens to have us back. If she
No, for sure. We'll have to bring you back. We'll bring back Mackenzie, CC. We'll get them all on here.
Oh, snap.
Right, a
Let's
whole
go.
family affair.
The whole fam.
Yeah, that sounds
That's our
great.
stories. That's
Right.
us.
And now, again, Kevin's married.
I am married.
Talk about that.
Ooh.
Almost getting close to a year.
Close
You have
to
a
a
few more
year.
months, yeah.
Labor Day weekend is our anniversary. So I met my wife at Lee. She's Nashville born and raised. And again, story for another day, but played the long game with her. You know, we kind of just friends initially, but stayed in contact for a good bit. And Justin was a good wingman eventually at some point of our story.
Yeah, it was getting too long, man.
And,
I was like,
he's
listen,
like,
it
"Okay,
is
we gotta wrap
time.
this
It's
up.
time to move this
We
to the
gotta
next
wrap this up,
level.
yeah.
So anyway, he pushed me a little bit, and we dated for about a year, and got engaged, and we're married. We live in North Nashville now, so it's a great life that we live.
That is so cute.
So cute. Oh my
Anyway,
goodness.
but that's not why we're here. We're here.
I also lived with him for like a month and a half.
I also lived with Justin for a month when I first got here, so
Yeah.
we got great history.
Right. So that's awesome. Thank you guys for just like introducing yourselves.
Thanks for
I
having
like
us.
to do a small little segment at the beginning, just like
Of
little
ASMR.
icebreakers. I mean, you can do some ASMR. Everyone likes to get ASMR.
Stop messing up our podcast.
Bro, this is Justin in like raw form. I mean,
Welcome
this
to entertainment,
This
everybody.
is him. But yeah, just like some icebreaker questions. So I texted Jordan and Blake, and I was like, okay.
Oh no.
I was like, okay, I'm having, Justin and Kevin on my podcast.
Jordan and
Like,
Blake,
what
if
should
you're
I do?
listening,
Like, what should I do for
I'm not a
icebreakers?
fan.
They suggested never have I ever, because they're like, they're frat boys, so do like never have I ever.
Okay.
So
Oh my gosh.
they gave me
Okay.
some suggestions, some suggestions.
They're hard.
It's hard to find the balance between like appropriate and like not boring. So
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
they're like really, really hard.
I
like
edge
fair.
that line off.
Right. Because there's a lot of like really good ones, but it's like, it's probably not appropriate. So I did my best.
Or my
There's a
response
few
would
on
not be
here.
appropriate.
Well, we'll see. Might have to do some editing on this next part, guys. But yeah, so I'm just gonna jump right in. Never have I ever had road rage. Obviously, we've all had road rage, but do you have like a specific, like really just like crazy story about road rage?
I was about to ask how I ever works. I don't think I've ever played it.
Well, typically you do like the whole finger, like hand
Oh,
thing.
and you put one down
put a
if you
finger
have.
down. Yeah, but
Never
we
have
could.
I ever. Justin has never ever played. Never have I ever. So.
Cool. So never have I ever played. Never have I ever. Keep all your hands up. So yeah.
So road rage.
Yes, road rage. That's the question.
You want a road rage story?
Yeah, like
I think Kevin needs to go
if there's
first.
one that just like comes to, because obviously we all have road rage, but is there one that like comes to your mind that's just like, that was crazy?
This podcast would be way too long if we talked about all my road rage
Oh, yeah.
incidents.
Yes, it would.
I don't necessarily feel like I have a specific instance that comes to my mind, but
Mm-hmm.
I definitely suffer from road rage often. My biggest
Make
pet
it sound
peeve-
like it's a disease, like it's something you
It
can't
is-
control.
My biggest pet peeve is when there's two lanes, or when there's three lanes and it merges into two, and some Joe schmo tries to go all the way to the end, and I am definitely the guy who does the civil duty of making sure they don't get over, and it does not end up very well. So,
Right.
Yeah, I
You being
suffer
stubborn? Crazy.
I suffer from road rage for sure.
Next one. Never have I ever fell asleep during a church service.
All the time.
Easily.
All the time.
Yeah.
Especially during youth trips.
Yeah,
Like,
that's me for sure.
There's
3 hours later.
There's a reason why they call me Peepaw, and I mean, like 9 o'clock hits, I'm ready to go to bed. So if service starts to get really
Oh, yeah.
long, I'm falling asleep. I'm dozing
Right.
off.
It's
When I was
mainly
a-
the trips for me too.
Well,
when
because
I'm
you're
exhausted.
exhausted
When
from
I'm
playing
ex-
out in the
yeah,
sun, and then you had a service that morning, you got a service at night, and it's 3 hours long.
Right.
Very difficult. When I was younger, I would crawl underneath the pew during Sunday night service because we had Sunday morning service and then drama practice and then Sunday night service. I would crawl under the pew. That way my head, like my eyes wouldn't have the lights in them, and I would just zonk out underneath the pew.
Right.
We're also pastor's kids, so there's probably a lot of instances where
Good old
when we
PKs.
were younger, where we
It's
just
like you
Yo,
lived
we
there,
doused.
so
Yeah.
When we were younger, but also when I was an adult, when I would come home from college, my parents lived in Florida. They moved there while I was in college. And I would start out service during worship, and I'd be tired, and I didn't want to hear the preaching. So I would go into my dad's office, and I would fall asleep in his
Take
chair.
a little nap.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. We'll snooze.
That's our story.
Yeah.
We're sticking to it.
Never have I ever been on TV.
Oh, I have.
Multiple times.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We're superstars. What are you
Duh.
looking at?
Obviously, celebrities.
Have you ever seen Shake It Up Chicago? I was a background dancer.
Okay.
Okay, I don't believe that. Are you being serious?
No. I almost said something. Yeah, for real.
Like, are you actually on the show? Like,
No cap,
Yes,
as the
I'm
kids like
on
to
the
say.
show.
so like, do you know what episode?
Season
you're on?
2, episode 3.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
that's
We're looking that
crazy.
up afterwards.
Yeah.
That
I'm just
is
kidding. That is a
crazy.
bold-faced lie.
Okay, I was
But-
like, bro, I was not believing it.
Isn't Shake It Up Chicago a fake show?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Shake It Up Chicago was on Disney. Here's the thing, though. When I was
No, yeah, Shake It Up Chicago is real, and I watched that show. That's why I'm like, I feel like I would have recognized.
when I was in
Justin.
youth group, what year was that? I guess I was a junior in high school. We went on a like winter trip to Gatlinburg, and walking around Gatlinburg, we came up with this idea, and we're like, all right, here's a social experiment. So we had the 2 tallest dudes in youth group walk around with me. And like I had this leather jacket on, these leather pants. I had
Oh
my
my
hat
God,
backwards.
I've seen videos like that where it's like play
the real Justin Sigel.
Yeah.
And so just walking
hate
around,
that.
and we had girls from the youth group come up to me, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, can you please take a picture with us? It's so cool that we met you." Blah blah blah. And we would take a picture, and then over time, people that I didn't know started coming up to me. They're like, "Oh yeah, I recognize you." And one of the ladies was like, "Oh yeah, you're from Shake It Up Chicago."
Are you
So like that
serious?
narrative spread throughout the like Gatlinburg Strip throughout the course of that day. I was having
That is-
tweets written about me.
Oh.
It was
That is
incredible.
crazy.
And then me being the honest person I am, I was like, "Hey guys, it was a social experiment." Blah blah blah.
And
then I got blocked by a bunch of people. For those of you that don't know, I was a Scottish Highland dancer.
There are
So
pictures. There are pictures.
I competed. I wore a kilt. I danced over swords. It was phenomenal. So yeah, I was on the news multiple times for that.
That's crazy. I
would
don't
just
think
like
I knew
to
that.
speak to my lackadaisical. That's awesome. I don't endorse lies, and so that's why I wasn't about you being.
Oh,
so.
okay.
I did the weather when I was 5, so that was cool. I was
Really?
able to like touch the
What
screen.
does that
and be
mean?
on
You did the
TV.
weather, like you
Like,
made weather?
I gave the weather forecast on the news one day, so that was
Oh.
cool.
That's pretty cool.
And then another memorable time, my high school choir. I'm a choir nerd, and
Same.
we sang for like Christmas, and we were on the news. So
Yeah.
Anyway,
That's
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I think I was on TV one time. It was like when I was in first grade, they did like one of those news things at the school, and it was like spotlighting my teacher or something. So I was in that video.
You were just
Were you in the background?
I
You're
was
like,
literally it's like coloring.
Hey,
on
Mom.
Danielle Green as
Right.
Danielle Green.
I think that's now Kaylee. Kaylee almost made it on TV though with America's Funniest Videos.
Yes, that was
Oh
very
my
close.
gosh.
I forgot about that.
Right. I don't know what happened with it, but like people
AFE
had to
put 'em
sign
on.
like waivers and stuff to or like to get their face on TV. Like it was a real
It was
thing.
legit.
That's wild.
It was at a church event. She she was skating and like did the limbo and like fell backwards. It was hilarious.
That was great.
So she almost made it on America's Funniest Videos.
You should
For
put
a
that video
concussion.
on the YouTube.
Right. I'll play it right now.
Is there a video of you getting your face smacked?
Oh, okay. Next question.
No, but I heard that noise when that ball hit your face. I heard it. I thought it was just a line drive to your head. That's why I was like freaking out.
No.
Thankfully, the ground absorbed something though, at least.
Well, no, Mackenzie sent us pictures. He's got a rag on his face, smiling, but like just blood right here. And I was like, he does not look okay.
Right.
I was not. I was concussed. So
Because
I didn't know
she
what was
sent that picture to
going
my mom
on.
too. Never have I ever been on a blind date.
Do we have to be involved with, like, is it a date that we're on?
Yeah. Did you go on a blind? What do you mean?
Never
Is it
have
a
I
date
ever
you've been on?
Yeah, like
Are you on the blind? Have you ever been on a blind date?
Ne-
Yes, you're involved.
I have never been on a blind date.
Oh, the Neely situation.
Don't use the name.
Okay, cut that.
But
I'll bleep the name
I've
out.
never
The
been
little
on
sister
a blind,
situation.
Yes, never been on a blind date by as myself. But
Mm-hmm.
I had a friend who went on a blind date, and she was super nervous. So
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of us went to the restaurant that she was going to.
Okay, so you've been a part of
Yes,
it. Okay.
and we ended up actually sitting at the table across.
That's a
from
valid
the
question
divider.
now thinking about it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so we like walked around every 10 minutes, and they saw us. It was amazing. It was
Uh-huh.
my favorite part. So.
Yeah, well, she went out with this, like, we all knew he was a goob, and not in a good way.
Goob.
You know?
That's a funny
Goob is a
word.
nice word.
Have you been
I've
on a
never
blind
been
date,
on a
Justin?
blind date, but, you know, back in the days when I was a single man living in Nashville, I was on every dating app known to man.
You've never lived in Nashville, but it's okay.
Okay, nobody knows where Murfreesboro is. Anyway, I was on every dating app known to man, and there were some dates where I wanted to be blind.
Oh my gosh.
So that's the blind date that you're.
Well, here's the thing,
Nice.
dude. Guys do this too, but like people on dating apps, for some reason, think that they can project themselves one way with photos that are clearly not of them, and then you show up and you're like,
Yeah, that's not who I'm
That's
supposed
not
to be
you.
with. Yeah.
I'm that guy.
"Are you?
Yes.
What was your dating app like?"
All right, next question.
That was good. That was good. Never have I ever re-gifted a gift.
100%.
Yes,
Yeah, all the time.
I got one sitting in my closet right now for next Christmas.
If you don't re-gift gifts,
Oh, yeah.
you're missing out.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, why purchase something?
I don't
when you can
think. Yeah, that's no question.
Yeah. Never have I ever Googled myself.
100%.
always.
Who
I
hasn't?
have. Now it's been a long time though. I was like probably in middle school or something, or maybe freshman in high school.
When I was a kid, I Googled myself on our like desktop Dell computer. It was like this thick, and it had
Literally
AOL
nothing.
dial-up. Anyway, when I would Google myself, there was a Justin Siegel. I want to say he lived in Colorado. He was a track runner. He was like 5 years older than I was. He had like all these different medals and stuff. I was like, oh, I want my like face to pop up when you type in Justin Siegel. Fast forward.
No, it does.
Yep.
Congratulations. I think my name comes up. I was on like some senior recognition when I was in high school, so I think
Danielle-
that article comes up.
Let's
so.
see.
Sorry. Danielle Green, former member of the Victorian
I
Legislative.
saw that. Yep. I mean that is me. So
Danielle, you look different in these photos.
indeed I do.
Like, one, you have white hair.
Yep.
The other one, you're a completely different skin color.
Yep.
Dark hair.
I've
Speaking of hair,
Taken
Danielle
many
changed her
shades.
hair
Danielle has
recently.
changed her hair. It's
I
great.
have guys.
I told her she should do
This
a
is a
bob cut.
crazy story. I don't know if you. No, I don't think you were there. Oh my goodness. So basically, Justine Goad, you know Justine. Her husband plays with.
I
Kevin
thought
on
you
the
were
softball
calling
team.
me Justine for a second. I was like, all right.
No, Justine. No, Justine. She goes to the church here now. But her husband's on the softball team, so I was at one of the games one night, and she cuts hair, and so I was telling her like, hey, like I want to get my hair cut. Can I set up an appointment? And she's like, I have my stuff in the car like right now. Like if you want me to cut it. And I have pictures, and
Did
I'll
she
show
do it
you
at the
after.
softball game?
She cut my hair at the softball
Oh,
game.
my word.
I will pop pictures
That's
on the screen.
incredible.
But and I'll show y'all pictures after. But like she like chopped my hair right there at the game. Like Jordan literally like caught all the hair in her hands and
Why?
like put it in the trash
Yeah,
can.
why would she do that?
I don't know. I don't know.
Oh, the golden
She's
locks.
like, let me touch that beautiful hair of yours.
It's like the hem of Jesus' garment.
So yeah, I
except
got my
your
hair cut at a softball game, and she did a great job. Like, I love it too. I love it short.
That's a cool thing to do for like 2 truths and a lie.
Right.
Had my hair cut at a softball game.
So yeah, that's why. But I really do love it short. I would even love
I
to
do too.
maybe go even shorter. I don't know.
Yes.
Kind of experimenting.
Bob.
But I do love
Bob
it.
and bangs.
We talked about. I mean, bangs are back for sure.
Yes, they are.
And I feel like I don't know. I might.
I could
It's
see you
just.
rocking some bangs.
Yeah, I might. It just
Maybe
takes
not for
commitment though.
long-term,
It
yeah.
takes commitment though. And I had bangs when I was a kid, and it kind of scarred me. Like, bro, because bangs
Did
were.
you cut it though?
No, well,
Yep.
Yeah, if you gotta
Yeah.
question
No.
it,
Yeah.
yes.
no, because me and Kaylee both had bangs. Though I definitely did cut my hair at some point, because every child cuts their hair at some point in their life, right? That's a thing. But I just hated it. Like, looking back, it's like, oh, it was cute, whatever. But I always make fun of like my mom for like making me and Kaylee, like McKenna, Kelly, we all had bangs. It must have just been like a phase that everyone went through.
Yeah, well, I had a bowl
imitating
cut
it.
as a kid.
Yeah, bowl cuts were pretty big.
And then my mom thought it was smart when I was like 2 to just stick my hair straight up.
Yeah.
Spike it.
Didn't you have a mohawk for a while? Did you ever have a mohawk?
I did have a mohawk. I bleached the tips when I was in high school.
Yeah, that sounds like something you would do.
Yeah, well, I very badly wanted to be a b-boy, and so I took inspiration from that. Had like a faux hawk with
Yeah, yeah.
bangs and frosted tips.
I just want one more question. Never have
No
I
mas.
ever met a celebrity.
Yes, I have.
I have. Multiple
Yeah.
times.
Who was yours?
I mean, there's...
You've met a soccer player recently, right?
Yeah, soccer player.
Okay.
I've met tons of people throughout my. I mean, that's not like a big brag, but definitely you just come in contact with
Yeah,
people
yeah.
if you make those efforts. So, it's a cool experience. I think, especially here in Nashville too. If you come in contact with celebrities, it's kind of the unsaid thing to not really make a huge deal about it. You
right.
kind of let them live their lives and do their thing.
Yeah.
I get upset when people try to go take pictures because it's like, hey, they're normal people too. But
Yeah.
it's definitely cool when you kind of have a sighting of a celebrity, you maybe have a conversation with them, and yeah.
Well, it's also cool to see like they are just a normal person. They're just a person. Like you just have a
100%.
conversation with them, and it's not like some crazy thing. But I know like you've done like art for a bunch of artists too, right?
Yeah.
Like music artists and stuff.
Increasingly so. Julia Wolf was probably the first one that I did stuff for.
I follow Danielle Green on social media, so she's my celebrity that I
Nice.
That's amazing.
Well, I was gonna say Justin Sigel, and so.
Okay, hate that.
Bro, you're literally famous.
I don't see myself that way.
He's got a lot of followers.
He does. I appreciate that you're humble about it, though. Like, I think that's really,
I have a lot of...
On the
okay,
cameras,
pause.
he's being humble, so.
I have 1.5 million followers. However, that in my mind does not equate to fame.
Yeah,
I think
that's true.
fame has to do with, like, media exposure. Like, are things written about you? Have you done interviews for some major...
Who knows you?
Yeah, exactly. Who knows you? What have you been featured on? And so I don't put myself in that realm of things. So that's why
Right.
I don't like hearing that I'm famous, because I don't believe I am.
So we're going to be talking about creativity. Obviously, I think y'all would be perfect. Justin with...
Why?
I'm going to explain.
Okay.
Justin with painting, drawing, video photography, but Kevin with... I know, like, you love... to write, you're very good with words, and you were a pastor too, so that comes into play. And
I also do
and
photography.
you also do photography.
Not as good as Justin, but
yeah,
I enjoy
you also
photography.
do photography, and
I haven't that
you
in my
definitely have an
signatures.
eye for that though,
Well,
for
thank
sure,
you.
A black
and
eye.
video.
Yeah.
And so I think y'all would just be great. So maybe just start off talking about where y'all's passion for like art and writing and photography kind of came from, and how y'all have grown that.
I saw Bob Ross. No, I'm just kidding.
I saw Bob Ross live.
I don't know where my creativity came from. I will say there was a few family members of mine that were super artistic, very creative. My cousin, most notably, my cousin Josh, he would just like sit in the living room during family functions, because my mom's whole side of the family would gather together on Sundays after church. We would eat, watch the NASCAR races. Don't ask me why. But he would sit over in the corner on the couch and just take a pen and a napkin and like doodle on things. And I wanted to draw like him so bad. So that's my earliest memory of like wanting to do something creative. And then once my Nana saw that I was interested in drawing, painting, stuff like that, she bought me this painting set where you like paint flowers with one brush stroke by loading the brush up with different colors. And so that's my earliest memory of painting. Excuse me. And I don't know. From then on, just art was a constant part of my development and in my life. Art class was my favorite growing up. And
Not
then
mine. Not mine.
No.
No. But this is your turn to talk.
Oh,
so I'll
okay.
Let you finish.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
You
No,
loved
no,
art
no.
class. Go ahead.
All right. So I loved art class. I wanted to go into art school, but it didn't seem like the most, what am I trying to say, financially stable choice at the time. You hear about starving artists your whole life growing up. Well, you're not going to go to school to be an artist. And so I went to culinary, and then at that time is when I started getting into performance art. I saw a guy named David Garibaldi who painted Elvis live on America's Got Talent. And I was like, oh, that's sick.
Yeah.
I want to do that. And it kind of combined a few areas of my life that I loved. I did drama in church growing up, dance, loved music. And so it kind of just combined all those worlds together into one thing. And so obsessed over stuff for a year while I was in culinary, and realized culinary was not the thing that I wanted to do. Even though this didn't have potential for financial stability at the time, I wanted to pursue it. And so I had my first performance at a Methodist church. And when I got up to paint, it was towards the end of the service. It was the first time during that service and I painted Christ upside down, flipped it around. Classic. It's still on YouTube. It's awful compared to the stuff that I do now.
100%, yes.
Anyway.
You've had a glow up.
Yes, I have. I mean, it was 10 years ago. And so, God, I sound so old. So when I flipped it around, it was the first point in the church service where there was unscripted praise to God. And so people started clapping, and I don't know, to me, it just seemed like an uproar of worship, and the whole service was scripted up to that point. And it was at that point that I realized this could be a career and a ministry.
Absolutely.
And I don't have to say a single word to show people who Christ is. And so that's when I started down the art path as far as a career goes.
Yeah.
But I have I mentioned culinary. That was my way of thinking, okay, I can monetize my creativity by baking and pastry and creating food. And so that's still a passion of mine. Photography is a passion, as I mentioned before. I've recently gotten into music production.
Let's go.
Pretty decent at it too.
Yeah. And nobody else is going to hear that. That's not getting shared to the public or on social media. That is just
pre-save.
That is a venture for myself. I've sewn things together. I've made clothing. So I don't know. I feel like if you're a creative, you are going to make whatever you venture into a creative venture.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So yeah. Kevin?
Well, obviously, I'm here for the writing portion of our creative minds, but
Which is something I'm not good at, by the way.
Yeah, I think you're decent at it. I think you're good.
I appreciate your pity.
So I started writing I was able to read really young. My mom and dad pushed me when I was in preschool, kindergarten to start reading. So obviously that kind of translated to maybe not coherent sentences of well-spelled words and whatnot, but I was able to write at a very young age. And so, again, love sports. Sports are one of my favorite things.
Go sports ball.
And so I always would come up with, in my mind, just creative, imaginative events and use real life teams and whatnot. And I would come up with these random stories that would happen with these two teams. And so I would begin writing these news articles on Microsoft Publisher or Microsoft Word. I think my mom still has some files on that, but that's kind of where that started, that initial passion. But once I realized that art encompasses so much more than just writing, I think that opened up the potential to expand my horizons a little bit beyond just writing. And so I was able to find more passions other than writing because I saw, and I think, and I guess we'll talk about this later too, but when you are creative, your mind is wired to be that kind of creative thinking process. And so writing something in Microsoft Publisher, kind of translates to taking a picture in downtown Nashville, And so I think just finding out that the potential, the possibilities of being a creative and what art can be, I think that just really drove me to want to find out more about what it means to be creative and what can I do? What can I put my hands to? I love being practical with my hands and using my hands to create things. And so that was just a really good way to apply that passion. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
You said you read well as a child. It reminded me of those reading tests you have to do when you're in school to see how fast you can read.
Yeah.
I failed those miserably, and I was supposed to be held back for it. And that translates to even this day. So I'm glad that you can read because
I can read words. I just don't process.
I say all that to say I failed reading. It takes me forever to get through a book. I was super self-conscious about it for a long time.
So I definitely peaked in first grade. Let me make it clear. Right? Junie B. Jones, those were my books. And if you put a big novel in front of it, man, I struggle to read it. So don't feel like I'm some master reader.
I was a big
that does make me feel better. Thank you.
You were what?
I was a big diary
wimpy kid.
Really?
I
was captain.
loved it because I hated reading, so I loved the little graphic parts.
Yes, Calvin and Hobbes.
And
I love
stuff.
Calvin.
Yeah.
Calvin and Hobbes was great. My dad had a Calvin and Hobbes book that I read. Captain Underpants was my jam.
Nice.
Yes, I read those too.
Yep,
they're good.
Wow, we're old.
And then the one series that I actually read. Well, my mom read it to me when I was going to bed.
That's sweet.
Yeah, it was very sweet. But you had required reading and you had to pick out books from the library. But it was the Alex Rider series. I don't know if you remember that. Mm-mm. He was like a kid version of 007.
Oh, okay. I don't think I've ever heard of it either, but it sounds interesting.
It was cool. 10 out of 10 recommend. I think I would enjoy it as an adult. So check it out.
Let's go.
This is not sponsored.
Not sponsored. So why is creativity so powerful? Like, what has that meant? I mean, I know, like, Justin, that's what you do for a living now, but, like, what has that meant to you?
I wouldn't say that I do creativity for a living, but I would say that I am creative for a living. And I think creativity is so powerful because at our essence, whether you are a Christian or you believe in any other faith-based structure, I think at our core, we were created, right? And so we are a product at our very first moments of being a being was sparked with creativity from the divine. And so I think that's why it's so powerful, because it gets to our core and the divine fingerprint on our lives. And so when we are creative, it is able to tap into that essence that's in all of us. I hate it when people are like, I'm not creative, because I think that's bogus. I think everybody is creative. I think it looks differently for everybody.
You're taking my notes. Okay.
And so anyway, it gets to the essence of who each and every human being is. And so when we're creative, we're tapping into that, but also we're able to connect to something that ties us all together, which is creativity. It's a common denominator between all human beings, I believe.
Yeah. No, that's so good.
When I was thinking about this, the first thing that came to my mind was creativity brings the world into a new perspective, right? You know, a lot of things.
No, that's good. That's crazy. That's literally that's in this book. That's so crazy.
Not sponsored.
I mean, like
Not
a lot of
we'll get to that later, but
a lot of the stuff that we come in contact with in our world, it's just very black and white, right? It's just, and when you think of things of this world in a creative mindset, the possibilities of what it is or what you can make it out to be, I mean, they just become endless. And I just enjoy, I mean, a practical example I can think of is when Justin and I will go shoot pictures downtown. I may look at something and think this has no potential whatsoever, but Justin's like, hey, let me get this picture here. Let me get this perspective. And so it allows you to see the world in different ways. And I also think, too, a picture is worth 1,000 words. You know, you hear that statement all the time, but genuinely, somebody can look at a picture and you can tell a whole story with that kind of picture, too. And the beauty of that, it blows my mind that you can communicate in such a way. I think a lot of times we lose that beauty of creativity in this day and age of social media. I'm not a boomer who hates social media, by the way. But a lot of times it's just, this is what we're doing. We see all the highlights of people's lives, and we don't really get the full story of what's happening. And so to be able to kind of change that and see, if I take a picture of downtown Nashville when it's cloudy, you know, I want to paint a picture of what the story of that day was, you know. And I think the other big thing of creativity is what I put here as well. It provides an avenue for people to feel like they belong, or that they have purpose and direction, where they may not find that somewhere else, you know. I think we're all creatives here. If you're listening to this podcast, maybe you're a creative too. I think I can safely say in this room, creatives are weird. They're weird people. They have weird minds. They think weird ways. And a lot of times when they try to fit in, when we try to fit in certain places or certain groups or areas, it's very hard because we don't think like those people do. And so pursuing an avenue of creativity allows you to kind of fit in the places that you want to. And if you can't fit in where you're maybe trying, you have other avenues to pursue, or you're able to make your own avenue. And I think that's just, the options are endless, you know, and I think that's just a beautiful thing about that.
Right.
I like that you said that creativity can involve you fitting in somewhere where you belong and also creating your own avenue, because I think a lot of creatives get stuck with, I have to be so unique and so different, I can never fit in anywhere. But I think the reality of it is there's common denominators between us all. There's differences between us all. And finding places where both of those are accepted is huge.
Well, and not to beat a dead horse with this question, but I think creativity is such a beautiful thing that it's a good getaway to escape, you know, whether it's your problems or you just need to get away from work for a little bit.
To get away or to express.
When COVID happened and everything shut down, you know, Justin and I, we lived pretty close to each other in our apartment complex, and there'd be days we'd say, hey, that was back when people could still go outside and it was acceptable somewhat. Like we would say, hey, like, you want to go to Nashville and just take a couple of pictures, or do you want to go do this? You want to go do that? And it was just because we needed to get out of the apartment. We needed an avenue to escape, and creativity was a beautiful way to do that. And so the options are, I could go on and on about this, but like the options are endless when it comes to creativity. And I think that's the beautiful thing about that.
Okay, so I'm reading this book. It's called All That Is Made, A Guide to Faith and Creative Life. But
why'd you say it like that?
I just think it's funny like
Blink
that.
twice if you're okay and you're not being forced to read this book. Okay.
Is this today's sponsor?
So, and this is kind of playing off of, I think Justin said, expressing yourself through art, through writing. A line in this book, it says, "It is creatives that both give voice to our suffering and imagine a world in which it is not wasted." So I kind of just want to talk about that line about, expressing our emotions using our suffering, our pain, a season of life that we're going through, whatever, to, show that the good can come out of it, and even like raising awareness or just making something beautiful out of a time of suffering. If there's just anything y'all want to say about that.
I got a lot to say about that, but you can go ahead first.
Yeah, I think
since I stole your points last time.
Again, I'm not trying to sound like a boomer over here, but like in today's society where social media, you're able to put your opinion out very easily. I think you see that a lot, right? Somebody wants to make an opinion about something happening in the world, they're going to post a tweet, or they're going to post an Instagram post, or I've been guilty of this, post some novel.
Do you say post a tweet, or do you say tweet?
Tweet, sorry.
No, I just
tweet a tweet.
I don't Twitter often, so
or like I've definitely done this before. Make some long Facebook posts, that maybe 5 people read. It's like it's just a thing, right? That's how when we are suffering, we express that we are suffering. We want to express to people that as humans, whether you're a creative, you classify yourself as a creative or not. That's how we have begun to express that we're suffering in some way. Is let's put it out all on social media, so we can see that. And so I think in a sense, right, that's creativity has given us that way to suffer. Another example I think of, Justin and I, we went to Louisville to see some friends a while back, and there's an art museum there. And while we were there was a bunch of pieces that artists had made that were dealing with specific situations or times in history of suffering. So maybe like the civil rights movement or whatnot. And like these pieces of art painted a picture of what that movement meant to that artist and kind of expressed that suffering. Yeah. And I think also probably more practical experience in my life, the Nashville school shooting. When that happened, there was a picture that was posted by a local newspaper of a girl with her hand on the school bus, like absolutely just screaming for her dear life. And I think the purpose behind that, although I wasn't necessarily a huge fan of that picture, the purpose behind that was so that when Justin saw that picture or read that newspaper article, he was able to embody that suffering and feel that suffering as well. And so, the pieces that we write or the paintings that we can paint, they're able to encompass this suffering that we're facing. And then also, I think I also put here too, the adding on to the point of where this suffering is not wasted. In your creativity, you're able to paint a picture of optimism to the people that are seeing your pieces. And so you may be able to say, hey, the situation that we're going through, this thing that we're dealing with, it may not be great, but look on the bright side. There's a silver lining. There's a thing you can look towards and work for, and you're able to provide hope to somebody. Yeah. And I think that's creativity and creation, whether it be writing, it be painting, it be taking pictures, whatever. I think that's a beautiful thing. Is yes, you can show suffering, but you can also provide hope in that same time and know that your suffering that you're going through, yes, it may be terrible, but no, it's not in vain. There's hope behind all of this that you're going through.
To his point about social media giving us an outlet to be able to creatively express our suffering, I used to be so hard on people that would post about their breakups or post sad stuff after their breakups. Or
I mean, I'm not a fan of that. So
subtweet what?
Don't do it.
I disagree. Or subtweet via songs. Here's the thing, though. Like, who's to say you can't express those things the way that you wish to? You see artists all throughout history that paint paintings that depict a breakup or their ex burning at the stakes, or like they change paintings that they painted of those two together to just like an empowering piece of them. And so and everybody knew it, and it was shown to the public. And so I think social media has made it more widespread for your suffering to go out into the world. And if that's your way of feeling at ease because you've been able to express that, who am I to say you can't do that? And so I'm less against it. Would I do it personally? I have. I don't know that I would now, but if that is your way of expressing yourself, I say go ahead and do it. I have had many experiences portraying my suffering through creativity, whether that is subtweeting because I went through a breakup in high school. I once stated to my therapist, I'm like, I feel like I'm more attracted to art that expresses the dark parts of the human experience more so than the light parts of the human experience. And I don't know why that is. And I don't know how widely accepted that is by other people. But to me, the things that a lot of people are comfortable hiding, when people are able to express that and express that through creative ways, there's something so attractive to that or something so attractive to me about that. Because I think there was a question posed in one of my graduate classes of what is the point of suffering? And one of my professors said, I don't know that I can give you an answer to why we suffer, but what I can say is I have come to realize that through our suffering, it helps build community. It helps people to be able to tie their hearts to one another.
Yeah, that's so good.
In a way that you can't really do so without suffering. And so, I don't know. I think that's why I'm drawn to stuff like that, because I find my heart connecting the most to the intimate parts of someone else's heart who has created something through their suffering. Two pieces come to mind that I've personally done as an expression of suffering. And the one did not see the light of day for years until the dust settled from that experience, and I healed a lot from it. But when I was in this super toxic relationship in college, I was home on Christmas break and had a really, really bad phone call with the girl that I was dating at the time. And she was very manipulative, very narcissistic, incredibly toxic, and to the point where it started driving a wedge between me and my family members. And this was a conversation where I was trying to stand my ground, and she was just constantly berating me over the phone. I didn't know what to do. I felt my mind breaking in that moment. And so I ended the call. I went to the kitchen, and I just sat on the floor and started crying. My sister came in and saw me and didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do, gave me a hug, and I knew that I couldn't stay stationary. So I went out into the garage, and typically my outlet was something physical, like going on a run or going to work out. But at that time, I saw a roll of canvas that I had left over from the last time I was home, and a couple of paints, red and black, in the corner, and one brush. That was it. Because I don't typically paint when I'm at my parents' house, but I had materials there. And so for the first time in my life, I did something without a plan, and I hung up the canvas, and I started painting. And I just started painting brush strokes, and through those brush strokes, I started to see a face. And so I painted this face that actually depicted, in the end, the agony that I was feeling at the time. When people look at that piece, it grips their attention. Like, I've created pieces that I think are absolutely beautiful and technically good. This piece is not that at all. It's just a mess of brush strokes.
Right.
And I mean, I created it probably in a matter of minutes. unlike the paintings that I practice to do in a matter of minutes. But this piece stops people in their tracks, and they have questions about it immediately. And I think pieces like that connect to the heart strings more so than a piece where I've planned it out and I've done so much work to make it look a certain way. This was just raw emotion that was splattered onto the canvas.
Well, there's a sense of empathy and creation. You know, people see that, they see that piece and say, man, I know what you're going through, and they're almost able to help console you in those moments, but you may be able to help console them and share your experiences together because you have, I think you said it yourself, like that connects you, it bonds you with those things, and that empathy. There's power behind that to be able to allow each other to heal whatever you're going through. I think it's a beautiful thing.
I think transparency equals intimacy. And so when you're able to be transparent like that through your artwork, it automatically creates a connection on a deeper level with whatever human being you're interacting with in that piece.
That's so good. And one thing that stuck out to me was whenever you said going through suffering, but like finding community within that. I think that, and that's something I've heard a lot recently. And like this past year's kind of been hard for me, but like through all of that, like finding a really cool community of just people and really growing closer to like friends and family and mentors and stuff that like, you know, it truly helps you get through that season of your life. And so I thought that was really good.
I think the biggest lie that we can be fed is that nobody else can understand what you're going through. And sometimes that in itself will isolate us. Oh, nobody will understand. But you're not willing to talk to anybody to realize that you are not alone. And maybe they've been through it, or maybe they've been through a parallel event that they have experienced the same amount of suffering through.
And to your comment, Danielle, too, like that's life, right? We are meant to do life with each other, you know.
Plug for life groups.
Plug for life groups. But genuinely, I mean,
our website
not to be euphemistic here and be really corny about it, but whether you believe on a biblical standpoint or you're on the opposite side,
or anywhere in between,
too, you know, there is a universal belief that we're supposed to do life with each other. You know, we are humans. We are wired to have communion with each other and be in the presence of other people, and when you begin to you lean into that, especially in your suffering, it's a beautiful thing. I mean, that's what we're called to do. That's what we're supposed to do.
I just realized
I lost my point, kind of, so I had to like tie it back up.
No, it was good. You tied it up well, and it sparked something that I've never thought about before. The fact that like, so today in the news, you don't hear a lot about big communities. You hear a lot about individuals, a lot of celebrities, a lot of people who are doing things. When you study history, you hear a lot about individuals that have done amazing things when you think about American history, right? But when we look at cultures in the past, individuals don't really stick out unless it's something like a king or a pharaoh or something like that. We study communities and their artwork, whether it's cave paintings or carvings on the side of buildings or in caves. It's like everything was so communal, and so much of the responsibilities of day-to-day life is put on an individual now. I don't know. I never thought about that before, though. In the past, they had a lot better of a grip that community is important than we do now. Just because we can doesn't mean it's beneficial.
Yeah. Well, and in trying to go through, like, you know, my suffering alone, it's like, I'm sure y'all very much know, I don't like talking about my emotions, very much bottle everything up.
Never.
Okay. No, but like, whenever I started to open up about, like, you know, my life, what was going through my head, like, it brought me so much freedom just to, like, talk to someone. And it happened, like, people have gone through breakups, people have gone through, you know, transition and, you know, and talking to people. And it really brought me so much freedom. So
when it stays in your head, there's so much room for you to distort it, or for your brain to distort it. Listen,
or for me to think
listen,
that
I'm preaching to myself as well. I understand, Kevin Morrison. Stop looking at me like that.
Or for me to think that I'm the problem.
There's so much room for your brain to distort things and to make it not what it actually is. So the moment that it gets out of your head, through your mouth and into the ears of somebody else, that can help kind of straighten out the pieces. He's going to hate that I say this, but Brian Spatz, he's one of my mentors. he has done such a good job through my suffering the past few years of me communicating to him being one of the only people I've been able to communicate things to. And he like helps straighten out the distortions that my brain have
Puts
created.
it in perspective.
Yeah.
It's huge. It's huge.
Absolutely. So I'll want to read another little excerpt from this book. It's basically just a paragraph, and then at the end it has some questions that I think would be really cool for us to break down. It says, how did we get from creator to creative? The word creator is familiar to our tongues. The maker of something, the one responsible, the origin. Creative is less recognizable, changing, taking on a different meaning in our world today. We no longer discuss whether or not someone has a creative trait or characteristic, and instead we wonder if someone has enough of that ability to use it as an identity. But who or what determines whether we are a creative or not? Is it our job title, how much we produce, how often we create? And are we still creative when we are not creating? So I think it just kind of goes back to identity. So I think the first question we could hit on is who or what determines whether we are creative or not.
Can I take this one first?
Yeah, go ahead. If you take my notes, I'm going to be really, really upset.
Okay, listen. I used to wonder on that question a lot. And then a couple years back, I read a book called Pursuing Christ, Creating Art by Gary Molander.
Give that to me. It's a great book.
Dang right I did. It's a book I would suggest to anybody and everybody, because again, I think everybody is creative. And I think the narrative that that book was describing, which is what is the measure of creativity to make you a creative. I think that's something that our social structure has put on us. But the thing that Gary presents is there's a difference between creative and artist. Everybody is creative. Not everybody creates art. So what he suggests is creativity is when you fill a void with yourself. And everybody does that. You do that by your existence. And this is something that I've been preaching for a while, which is creativity is your life. It is the life that you live. And so that is how I define it, which again encompasses everybody, because everybody can fill a void with themselves, whatever that looks like. Maybe it's accounting. Maybe it's painting.
If it's accounting, I'm so sorry.
But no, listen. Without any accountants, there's a huge void in our society, and so.
But accountants don't like their lives, so
yeah.
Anyway,
some.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just feel like that needed to be
said. That was a good interruption. Anyway, so that's my definition. I don't think there's a mark that you hit, or a number that you hit of like, oh yeah, they're creative. No, I think everybody is creative. But not everybody is an artist.
Yeah, so I, in thinking about this question, something that really came to mind for me was you find it's kind of similar to your thoughts, but it honestly, I feel like kind of contradicts what you just said a little bit. So sorry.
Ooh, let's hear it.
Let's go.
You find your identity as a creator or as a creative through yourself and only yourself. Like, nobody can put that label on you. Nobody.
Sounds pretty new age.
I know, right? Nobody can determine whether that is you or not. Only you can decide whether you want to be somebody who is labeled as creative. I mean, yes, you can you create things, whether it's art. That's maybe your personal opinion, I guess. But if you think it's beautiful and you think it's art, that's all that matters, right? That's what classifies you as being a creative. I put in my notes, I think of the movie Ratatouille and their famous saying, everyone,
God, I love Ratatouille.
Everyone can cook, right? You know, but like, you take a rat who's not supposed to cook, and here he is making some of the best dishes in Paris. And
I saw a rat carrying a piece of pizza crust in New York when I was there. And I was like, there he is.
Ratatouille,
my man.
Remy's making his American. Remy's.
He's about to chop it up.
Remy's
make some
making his
breadcrumbs.
American state tour. But no, I just think like anybody can do it, right? I mean, granted, I think there's probably a general opinion of what gets created. I mean, if it's just a stick figure, you know, maybe that's not the best looking thing. But if you think that's great, then that's what you find fulfillment and satisfaction in. And I think it's then you're able to label yourself as creative, and nobody can take that away from you. And go ahead.
I was gonna say, because of the stick figure thing, I remember the funnest game I played when I was in middle school was this stick figure game. I think it was called Stickman. It was on addictinggames.com.
I love that game.
It was so much fun.
Not an official sponsor.
So I think a Stickman can be very, very creative.
And to kind of, I'll wrap my thoughts up on this. Justin and I have had this conversation many of times, especially when we were working at the church and tag teaming on creative things and whatnot. I think to kind of address your question about are we still creative when we're creating or not creating, or what does that classify, or who gives that title? I think when it starts to feel more like a job and it loses its fun, it loses its luster and its passion, that's when that title of creative kind of starts getting taken away a little bit. We definitely had multiple conversations when both of us were pressed, and especially like his painting side of things as well. I don't want to speak for yourself, but I just remember vividly having conversations with you about,
I've shared enough.
like where you felt like it was more of a job, or you felt like this was your source of income, and like this is you lost that passion, you lost that itch for being creative because there were other things that were pressing, other factors that were really playing a part of why you were making. And so I think when it loses that fun, it becomes a title. There's that saying, love what you do and you never work a day in your life. When it becomes not your passion anymore, then I think that's when you lose all that idea of being creative.
Can I push back on that for a little bit?
Sure, go ahead.
I don't think you cease to be creative or you lose your creativity. No. I think, and again, this derives from my definition, so I have an understanding that we have a different perspective when it comes to this, but it ceases to be art when you put it into the world, when it sucks you dry of life, and instead of fueling you, it depletes you. I think creating art should fuel you. So the moment it starts to deplete you and you see it as a job, is the moment it ceases to be art, but not creativity. I think you can still be creative and fit within a box. You can be creative and make content, but you can't create art for an algorithm.
Well, and not to sabotage your question here, Danielle, but maybe the question to be asked is, why are you being creative? Are you being creative because you're getting financial compensation for it, you're getting a paycheck, or are you being creative because you want to be creative? And even if you are getting a paycheck, like you make a great point. You don't cease being creative. You don't cease being a creator, whether you're doing it for a job or for fun. But I think it's, why are you being creative is the question that you have to ask yourself. Mm-hmm. And it's there where maybe you find even more fulfillment knowing that this is my getaway, this is my escape, my paradise that I can find fulfillment in, instead of I'm required to do this to put food on the table, or whatever. I think that's the question you have to ask yourself sometimes.
Yeah, the amount of partnerships and sponsorships that I've turned down that I could have easily done, but I would have felt like it was a drag to complete them because it kind of goes against, not like morally, but it goes against my creative ventures. And so it would not have been fun to do. I've turned those down and sought out opportunities that align more with what I want to do as an artist and as a creative, for that exact reason that you stated.
Any thoughts you want to add?
Yeah. One of my favorite things that y'all said was, when talking about being creative, but like doing it as a job, so like making a living, doing art, doing, photography, like whatever it is. But when it becomes more of a job than a passion. And I don't know, would you guys say that there needs to be a balance there as far as like making sure that you don't get burnt out? Like when it is your job and you're doing it so much, making sure that it's still a passion and not just a job that you have to do every day.
You should definitely seek that balance, but whether or not it's attainable, that's a difficult thing. Put your hand down.
Hi, Diane. I'm Justin.
I mean, that kind of what you said, Danielle, it's very difficult to find that balance, and you do receive that burnout when The text message really threw me off. You really do receive that burnout because you're creating, and you almost feel like it's an obligation. You're not able to use that creation for an escape. And I think I feel like we could all say we'd want to find a balance, but it's more practically it's easier thought of, but when you put it into practice, it's difficult.
Yeah, it's hard. The balance, I mean, I would say that I experienced burnout when I worked for the church, and it was because I was no longer creating things that aligned with my creative heart. And it 100% was all content and no art. And so then when I became a full-time artist, of course you have to make a living. Of course you have to monetize your stuff. And so I created a system where I thought I found a balance of creating what my audience wanted to see as a day job and then using my off time to create out of myself. And like Kevin said, that looked really doable on paper, but once I put it into practice, it wasn't too feasible. So if you are an artist, if you're a creator and that is your full-time job, I think you have to find a balance, but man, it's so hard. So I would, at this stage of the game, what I would tell people is the world needs your art. And so if it comes to sacrificing, I hesitant to say this, if it comes to sacrificing financial stability or sacrificing your happiness for financial stability, I would sacrifice the financial stability and find happiness and enjoyment and fulfillment, because again, I think when you create art and art that comes from yourself and not for content, it's going to fill you. I think you can find a balance, but I'd say to me at this stage of the game, having wealth doesn't equal financial stability necessarily. I think it's important to have financial stability. I'm not saying that you should not be financially stable. But I think what I've realized is wealth to me looks like having a choice of what I do with my time and what I get to create. And so hopefully you find your audience, because they're out there. You find your audience that connects with your art and not your content. Instead of trying to conform yourself to your audience, I hope you find people that would gladly help fuel your creative endeavors that you want to undertake.
Well, and I'll finish the question on this one, I guess. It's so easy to want to take this passion that you have and this desire to do these things and really, man, I want to do this for a living. I want to work and earn wage for this, like this. If I could do this the rest of my life and this is what I do as a job, that's great. I would love that. And you come to this fine line of, okay, I realize I'm pursuing this, but also I realize I run the risk of this could become really ugly and I might lose my love for this and my passion for this. And so they're just things you have to consider at that point of, is it worth, kind of like what Justin says, is it worth sacrificing my happiness knowing that I'm financially stable, or worth sacrificing my enjoyment of doing these things, writing or painting or taking pictures or whatever? Is it worth sacrificing those things for whatever I am sacrificing it for? And sometimes it is, sometimes it's not. And that's the age-old question, I guess. So.
No, and I think something we've danced around is within that happiness belt is mental health. And are you in a good mental health state in whatever system you're in whatever balance you've found as a creative? I'd say finding happiness also is included in that, finding mental stability, because a lot of people will maybe not burn themselves out, but wear their minds down to the point where it affects their relationships, it affects their home life, because they're doing something that they hate and they're taking it out on everybody around them. And so I think more than just finding happiness within yourself, creating a healthy environment within your mind that also creates a healthy environment for those around you, super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that kind of came to my mind when Justin was speaking, kind of like happiness versus financial stability. one thing I've learned is if we put our mental health first, we put ourselves first in that aspect, like the rest will be provided for us. So instead of just focusing on like working and making money, like putting yourself first, God's going to provide. He's going to take care of us. And that's not to say like be lazy and don't get a job, but God will provide. He cares for us. If we are strong and we are healthy, He will provide for us.
Again, I hate to even, hate's probably not their word. I dislike that I'm going to say it like this, I guess, but that's biblical, right? The psalmist talks about, you align your ways with the Lord and He'll give you the desires of your heart, and even in that same thought, Proverbs talks about, commit your ways to the Lord and He'll guide your steps, so it's, again, this is for another podcast for another day too, but, when you begin to, Paul talks about more of Him and less of me, when you relinquish yourself, you begin to find more fulfillment because you're leaving more room for God to fill you up in those things. And it kind of goes on to what we'll probably talk about here in a second, but these things that He's giving you, this creative mind, these passions, when He's filling you up with that, you find more happiness and fulfillment. And like you said, everything's kind of taken care of from there. And it's because we're taking that perspective that He's giving us, not necessarily this worldly perspective of trying to find fulfillment, like Justin talked about, in likes or money or whatever.
There's a reason what you do is fueling to you. And I think that goes back to God as well. Like, you have been divinely fingerprinted with this creative,
I was going to say that,
mindset, and this creative energy. And I think when you cease to do that, it drains your life force, because it separates you from your divine creative journey.
So yeah, we've already talked about this a little bit, but yeah, just kind of wrapping up, how do we glorify God through our creativity? The Creator, how are we going to glorify Him using what He's given us?
Do you want to go first? You want me to go first?
I think I went first on the last one, huh?
Okay. So I think most importantly, if your creation points people to Him, right? If what you're making, what you're doing, what you're writing, if that is pointing people to Him, if people are able to see the beautiful story of the gospel and they're able to see who God is truly, I think a lot of times in our world today, we get a misconception of who God is. And if you're able in your creation to be able to show people who God truly is, I think that's probably the most important way you can glorify Him. I put also here, God was this is really trendy, Justin. God was the first creative and creator, like He was the...
Well, it's like I said that in a less cheesy
I know,
way.
He was the OG, right? And so when you are able to imitate Him by being a creative yourself, and that's not to say that people who aren't creatives aren't pointing people and glorifying, God through what they do. But when you're able to imitate Him in such a way, I think that's a beautiful thing. As a creative, you gain appreciation of creation, right? You go and do things, you take pictures of things, you're able to see like, wow, God had His hand on this, God did this, and you're able just to really take it all in. A lot of times in our rushed world, it's very easy to kind of miss things, miss a sunset or miss this forest that's on the side of the interstate, like whatever. And that was a very specific example. But I think when you're able to kind of take a step back and think creatively and see the beauty in what is around us, I think in and of itself in your personal life that glorifies God. And then kind of what we talked about too, as a creative, our minds are wired, certain ways, and it's the way God made us. It's the way God intended us to be. He's given us gifts and He's given us passions. And so when we are creative, we're able to be good stewards of that. And that's a very important thing to do, right? Taking the talents, taking the gifts and the passions that God has given us and being good stewards of that, and using that for His purpose, for His glory. And I don't want to try to get too churchy in this, but like that's what it boils down to. Hold on, one more question. I have one more point. Sorry. And this is the last thing I had is when you see what you do as an offering and a calling, I think that's when you begin to glorify God through your creation. You're giving what you have, you're giving your time, you're giving your talents, you're giving everything through your creation. And when you see it as an offering and a gift, I can't help but think that God's up in heaven and just smiling, being proud of what you're doing. And I think those are good ways to glorify God through that. I'm getting made fun of over here for the listeners.
No, I am losing focus. I was just going to say, what you had to say about being a good steward is very good. I was just going to make a note for anybody out there who is unfamiliar with churchy language.
Yeah, that's true.
If I can just bring that to kind of a normal language, it's taking ownership over the creativity that God's given you and over your talents, over your gifts, taking ownership over that and being responsible for it.
It's like picking up trash and taking care of the earth. Like the earth's been given to us, and so we're going to take up the trash.
Yeah, facts. And so not just sitting on the couch and letting that wither away, and like actually exercising it. There was I don't quite agree with this term, but I'm going to use it as an example. Someone said, I'd rather burn out than rust out. I think there's some truth to that. I don't think you need to just sit in a driveway. If you're a car, sit in a driveway and let yourself rust out. You need to exercise your motor. You need to exercise your talents, your gifts, your creativity. And so be a good steward of that means take responsibility and utilize it well.
And I think with that too, when you're not, say you want to be a creative and you want to do it as a job, or when you're not taking the time to be creative, or you're not in a position as an occupation to do that kind of stuff, finding those avenues, to be able to be creative. Again, you kind of said not like sitting on the couch doing nothing, but being intentional to find avenues of creation, knowing that these are gifts and talents and passions that you've been given, and utilizing them in ways, even though you may be not given a specific opportunity to do so.
You made a lot of good points. I do disagree with one of your points, though, which I would have said the same thing a few years back, which is to glorify God is to when your creativity points back to God. I would disagree with that now. And I would say creativity glorifies God when you create, put that into the world. I don't think it has to directly point to God. There's secular art all throughout the Bible. You look at the way people decorated clothing for the king, pillars for these giant, temples and stuff. And some of them were for political temples. They weren't for spiritual temples. And so you see secular art represented in the Bible. But I would say if you create and you fill a void with yourself, whatever you put into the world, if it points back to your life, which it does because it's an extension of you, if your life is reflective of the divine, reflective of God, I think that in turn glorifies God. So I would say the best way we can glorify God through our artwork is just by being who we are and putting that into the world. And if your life is reflective of that, then it's going to point back to you.
So in a sense, isn't that using your work pointing people back to, if it's pointing back to you and you point people to God, isn't your work technically?
Yes, but again, I would push back on what you said.
Not directly, but
right. I would push back on what you said because that translates to your work has to directly be Christian. And I don't think that's
I never said that.
No. But what I'm saying is that could be the assumption made.
That's fair.
And so to make the distinction there, you can create secular art that can point back to your life. And if your life points back to who God is, I think that is glorifying God through your art.
I'll add another caveat to that, and not that we're about to fight here on a podcast, or argue. I just think you have to be careful in general who that ends up pointing, what your creation, who that influences and how it influences them and where it points to, what direction it points them to. It may not necessarily point them to God. It may not point them in a certain place that is heavenly or divine, but if it points them to it in a direction where they're not able to see God in those moments, I think that I'm not saying you have to stop doing what you're doing, but in a sense, I feel like you have to kind of reflect a little bit and say, all right, if this is what I truly want to do, I'm not necessarily having to create this Christian piece or whatnot, but if people aren't seeing God at all through any of this, then what if this is what I want to do, then I need to reevaluate. Does that make sense? I think that's not totally shooting down your point, I feel like, but I feel like it's adding on, I guess, in a sense.
Sure. I think there's a quote, I forget who said it. It's not our job to save people, right? Like, we're not Christ. We don't follow through on that. What we do is we create the opportunities for people to come to know who Christ is. And if you're a Christian, then that is kind of the belief set. And that kind of works against a traditional understanding of what evangelism is, that you're responsible for letting them know and then also following through with them to make sure that they say the sinner's prayer. But I think it's more so a thing of like, open up the opportunity, show them who Christ is because you're reflective of that. And then allow God to do the work in them. Don't try to like be a helicopter parent over them and force it down their throat, because that just ends up putting a bad taste in their mouth. And
we've seen that doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
Well,
that's not a strategy anymore.
And our God has given us.
Careful.
No. Hold on. Let me make sure I got this correctly, because that just threw me off. Our God has given us. What am I trying to say? Free choice.
Free will.
Free will is the word that I was looking for. Free will. And so if we're reflective of that God that's given us free will, then we're not in control of someone's salvation, nor should we try to manipulate it. And so, yeah, I think that goes to that.
Yeah, I agree with all of that.
If you married the two together, then I think we're good.
Right, like your art doesn't have to reflect God.
You don't have to paint a cross every day.
Yeah, you don't have to paint a cross every day. Just reflecting who he is. You don't have to shove it down anybody's throat, but it's also just stewarding those gifts well. Like, he's given us those gifts, we have to steward them well.
That's what I was trying to get at.
I think there's a guy I follow on Twitter. He covers the soccer team here in Nashville, and I love his stuff. I love his content. It wasn't until recently that I realized that he was a believer. He followed Jesus. He was a Christian, and I can kind of see where his lifestyle. And if I was not a believer, if I was not a Christian, then I can see, like, man, this guy follows. He's a Christian. He claims Jesus. And throughout his producing of content, of sharing stories of the team and whatnot, if I'm able to see that he is a part of that, maybe I link my appeal for what he produces to inquiring about who Jesus is and what's that about. And I think that's kind of the point you were making, was it doesn't necessarily have to be about Jesus, but if you can point people to him through your lifestyle and through your association of what you create, then I think in a sense you're fulfilling that too.
I think through your process and your journey with faith as well, I think it's too often we get stuck in this thing of like, oh, I have to perfectly represent who Christ is to the world. And then you're putting on a facade and you're not showing them the dark moments in your life and the moments where you're questioning things and wrestling with stuff. And so I think in that wrestling too, it's important for people to see. And so that's why I said also that like putting your human experience out into the world is important. Because too many times I've heard people say, I'm not good enough to be a Christian. And that breaks my heart, because none of us are good enough. All of us have faults. All of us fall short of things. I've become a fan of the definition of sin is missing the mark. And so all of us miss the mark. All of us fail. All of us sin. And so by hiding that and making ourselves look so good and like we represent Christ perfectly every single day is fake. And I don't think that's doing anybody any favors.
Well, it goes back to our conversation earlier of suffering and allowing people to walk through suffering together, and realizing that Justin goes through similar things that I go through, and I know he's a Christian. I know he loves Jesus, and the fact that he goes through those things makes me feel better and know that I don't have to have all my stuff together before I can pursue what Jesus is or explore this idea of what being a Christian is. And I think you kind of tie it all together. I think that's a good perspective to look at it is, yeah.
I think it's a great perspective.
Well, that's all I have as far as questions go.
No more questions.
That's all, folks.
Yeah, but thank you guys for watching, and Kevin and Justin, thank you so much for driving to Murfreesboro to be here to have a conversation.
Okay, I was about to be like sentimental, Danielle. It was an honor being here and having a conversation with you. And if we didn't, ruffle too many feathers, I would love to be back because I think there's a lot more around this topic that we could talk about.
100%. Creativity part 2.
Literally could talk for hours. So
yes,
it's an honor.
Thank you for having us. We're very proud of you. Again, I made a comment earlier. I don't know if she's going to include this or not, but it feels weird seeing you sitting in this chair now because we know you as little Danielle, and you're now grown. And
oh, how the turntables!
It's very.
We're both immensely proud of you.
Yes, we're proud, and it's a treat to see you doing what you're doing now, and why you're doing it as well. So, I think that's the biggest compliment. This is probably a prideful thing to say, but that's the biggest compliment that you and I could receive. Just being able to be people who have poured into her life and given her opportunities. So
yeah, and hey, I've said it before, but I'll say it again. I would not be who I am without you guys. Pour into me, show me things, grow my passions, and honestly, just having conversations. Like we've had talks like this off camera for years, right? Like
in a coffee shop.
Yeah, in a coffee shop about faith, about life, about struggles.
And it hasn't come without conflict. There's been some stressful moments too. So hey.
Yeah, but what I love is we have had those hard conversations, and we've grown so much through it.
In the words of the famous philosopher Vin Diesel, family.
Family.
Well, I'm gonna go watch Fast and Furious 10, guys. So I'll catch you in the next one.
What an outro.
Peace out.
Deuces.